Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Jim Fleisig. During today's show, we will discuss critical issues facing government and industry leaders as DevOps programs are implemented across government agencies. And I'm excited about this show because, I've been hearing so much about DevOps and containerization and agile development and all the benefits coming with it. So I feel like I'm going to get educated today. We have such a powerhouse group of panelists here that I think I'm going to learn a lot from you guys. So thanks for keeping me smart. But anyway, let's get into the show and into the issues. Let's first start off with Mark Schwartz over at USCIS. Mark, can you talk a little bit about some of the progress that you see being made in DevOps processes to deliver information technology solutions?
Sure. Well, I guess the first thing to say is that we're doing it. It's actually happening. The conversation has started. People are understanding what the state of the practice is. Some aspects of DevOps are easier to switch to than others,
right.
And part of it is just technical practices. And generally, when programmers are working, there aren't people looking over their shoulders,
right.
and passing judgment on what they're doing. So they can move to best technical practices for developing software pretty quickly when they learn them, right?
Sure.
Not a lot of obstacles there. So I'd say that we're starting to bring a lot of those practices in, and through them we're causing the cultural change and the other changes that we need.
Right. And I guess, for me, we've moved away from the Big Bang Theory down into the, doing the DevOps processes after many years of the, cost overruns and things like that. Mike Hermus, CTO over DHS, tell us about some of the areas you see progress being made with DevOps processes.
Great. Well, one of the areas I see progress is over at USCIS over here.
That's why you guys are on the show today.
At the department level, though, it is a bit of a different game, right? We're not directly typically controlling large development efforts. Our goal at the department level is to try to figure out ways to scale best practices across the entire agency, across the entire department. And I think the lay of the land is that there are pockets of folks that are doing really, really well. You heard what Mark's doing over there at USCIS. But we have lots of areas of the department that don't fully understand what DevOps or containerization is really about. So our mission is to really start educating folks about the value proposition. I think, I would say that where we are right now is a lot of folks, to Mark's point, have started to actually understand where the value lies. The fact that this is about not the latest shiny object, but this is about delivering capabilities to the mission in a more effective, more agile, more flexible fashion, and at a higher quality, right? And I think we have successfully had that conversation and gotten lots of buy-in across large swaths of the department. So, that's where I'm focused at the department level, and we're going to continue to drive at the component level to make real progress on the ground.
Terrific. Looking at this, it looks like, staying ahead of the power curve, staying in front of where the technology is going, things like that. I was reading yesterday about, the future of zero coding, where everything will be programmed and it'll be like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, things like that. Mm-hmm. Rob Thomas, now over at VA. Rob, known you for a long time in different roles. Now you've got a big role over VA. What do you see in terms of progress being made with DevOps program or DevOps processes there?
So I would say we have an ideal opportunity going to DevOps. I think where we're different at the department level, the VA is 300 and some thousand folks strong. We don't have a separate cemetery benefits or health CIO. Literally our entire CIO organization is centralized. We have our own centralized funding stream. So it is a different approach, taking it from the department level. When you look at what we've done just in the last year, it's pretty breathtaking because we were completely waterfall. We're now completely agile. You need to have a willing assistant secretary. We have that in Laverne Council. You need a willing secretary. The secretary came from Procter & Gamble, and he's actually involved in this, and I've actually spent time with the Secretary of the Air Force on this. So we've made a lot of progress in bringing in Agile and bringing in DevOps.
Excellent. Chuck Svoboda of Red Hat Public Sector. You tell us a little bit, how's Red Hat playing in all this? How are you guys helping the government and helping your customers move forward with these programs?
Yeah, so first of all, a lot of it has to do with education, right? So DevOps is a very nebulous term in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, Mark mentioned that too. It's getting smart about what it is.
Exactly, and it's kind of in a lot of ways I say the new hotness, right? Or the newish hotness. if you want to get a paper accepted, or white paper accepted, or accepted to a conference, and put DevOps in the title or container in the title, and darn it, you'll probably even get a sponsor. So just establishing what that definition means is the first part. And what I hear from a lot of customers is they'll, the classic portmanteau, developers and operators working more closely together, or even things like developing in Node and Ruby, or even developers deploying to production. So you hear a lot of folks say, well, we can't do that. No way can my developers go to production. Right. So what I like to do is kind of baseline it a bit and kind of raise the level and say, no, DevOps is really just the methodology, the practice of concentrating on business results rather than those underlying technical details like HA, security, and a few other things, right? And so just enable your developers and your coders to move faster and faster. Well, and this concept is nothing new, actually. I mean, we've always wanted to concentrate a lot more on business results, but what's happened now in the market is companies like Red Hat have created tools and methodologies that have made it so ubiquitous to be able to do that, that more and more organizations and federal agencies can actually adopt a DevOps way, a DevOps culture through those tools and frameworks.
Yeah, excellent. Jeff Johnson over at USPS. Jeff, I've known you back, I guess, FBI days. Now you're over at the Postal Service. How is Postal Service working with DevOps, and what are some of the progress you see going on over there?
Yes, good afternoon. And so the Postal Service has been working in an agile and working towards DevOps since 2011. And a lot of the things that you've already heard are absolutely critical to the success. And I would say that it's continuing to be a growing practice. I would say that instead of ignoring the high availability or ignoring the operational disciplines that need to take place, that what we've been able to do is we've been able to automate to make those things routine and testable, so that we don't have to spend a lot of time on the non-functional requirements, allowing the technology teams to focus on those functional business value requirements and driving that business value higher and faster, as well as driving that relationship with the customer to be much tighter and be a partner at the table as we move forward, is some of the key learnings of DevOps and some of the key efforts that we need to measure as far as getting that level of feedback and delivering that value to our customers.
Yeah, I'm telling you, the theme I picked up from all of you already is the idea that focus on results. It's all about focus on the result you're trying to achieve, and get in place the processes and let have it. Stu Hammer, how's Hewlett Packard Enterprise? Tell me how you're positioning in this space, and how you're supporting your customers, and what you see, where you see progress being made.
Well, we're really focusing on how can we better enable DevOps for our customers as they are adopting Agile, as they're adopting the DevOps velocity, and really improving the release time to production. And so we really focus, and I'll build on what Jeff said, 4 areas: really automation, quality, collaboration, and governance. And so from an automation perspective, it's not great, but the tools are integrating a lot better. And that's something that we've seen over the years, that it's not about tools, but as the tools integrate across your life cycle, your plan, define, deploy, test, and release, it becomes a lot better. The second thing, on the quality side, we are focusing on shift left. Do as much as you can on the development side, especially when it comes to security testing, and we do a lot with DoD and DHS. How can we improve that cycle? And we've seen over 50% defect reduction in that. On the collaboration side, it's about the process. Everybody kind of hit on that, and improving that, breaking down the silos. And the last thing, and I think this is, one of the most critical aspects of DevOps, is putting in place a governance program so you can properly measure this and improve your life cycle, because it's all about being able to drive that velocity.
Yeah, I think the governance issue is always an interesting one, and it's one that sometimes, if you don't think about it up front, you can have chaos. And I do know there's a lot of I'm seeing standards being developed, the CIS standards and things like that for software quality and software security management being built into DevOps. I see DoD doing that big time. I don't mention names of companies on the show, but I'll send you guys some follow-up maybe about what's going on there. Let's talk about Rob Thomas. Point to a program you think is being developed using DevOps processes that you think's going to make a difference or is making a difference.
So I would point to the Veterans Benefit Management System.
Okay.
I think that one is a great example. It's a great example because there was a lot of media about our claims backlog. What this program was about was automating that imaging the claims process, image enabling the claims process. What we did in that was bring Agile in. So in the past we had 61 documents for each software delivery. We had multiple gates, 20-some configuration governance boards. We completely cleansed that and flushed that out of the system. We created an environment in Charleston, South Carolina. And what we did was we brought the developers, the operations people, and the business people together, because it is about changing the culture and having the business folks show up differently with you as an integrated part of the Scrum. So as you're working the backlog, they can help you with those prioritizations. And then at the end of the day, it was really about value creation and delivery, because we're not doing it for technology's sake. We're about my VA, and it's about improving the veterans experience first, and then secondly, improving the employees' experience. And the Veterans Benefit Management System is where we've had our first great success in this.
Great, because you are right. VA, especially in political seasons, is makes the newspaper from time to time. Jeffrey Johnson, if I asked you to point to a program that you think's making a difference because of DevOps processes being used, what would you point at?
I would point at our .com website. We originally started with a website that was grown with several websites that were largely disconnected, and they didn't provide for a connected user experience to the Postal Service customers. We like to say that service is in our name, and it's part of who we are, so that's absolutely critical for the Postal Service to be competitive today. We worked through the traditional process of gathering requirements, and what we ended up coming is really a refresh of what USPS.com might be. That became long and slow. A small team exhibiting the DevOps principles, got together with the customer, created that backlog, worked through the process, and came up with the USPS.com website that you see today. Cut the time by a really large factor, cut the schedule and cost by a really large factor, and really cut out a lot of complexity that was being baked in with the traditional planned waterfall model.
Yeah, right. No, I'm like the USPS website. For someone like me, where I travel back and forth from the South up to here monthly several times, I'm always stopping mail, starting mail, so I'm on the website all the time. Mark Schwartz, if I asked you to point at a program at USCIS where you think DevOps is really making a difference for you and helping achieve results, which one would you point at?
Well, it's interesting actually listening to my fellow panelists. The thing that keeps coming up is this just the latest bright shiny object? Is DevOps just a term? For me, what it is today's best practices. We happen to call it DevOps, but it's what we do today. It's a best practice. So for me, that means we try to do DevOps with absolutely everything we do. It's just the right way to do things now. One good example of where we've used it very effectively is in our modernization program for E-Verify and Save. E-Verify, you probably know, is, well, maybe I'll explain it for your listeners.
There you go. I'm sure you know way better than I do, so go ahead.
This is the system that employers can use to verify the employment eligibility of people who are getting jobs with them. And we've had a modernization program going. It spent a number of years collecting and organizing requirements. And what didn't happen during those years when it was just collecting requirements is nobody actually made any progress, creating the thing, doing the modernization. So when we switched it over to a DevOps approach, it took us about 6 weeks to get the first release out. And when I say a release, I mean people actually started using it. The users actually switched over to the new system. And then after those 6 weeks, we just started incrementally improving it, releasing new capabilities every day or every couple of days. And for a program that had been so sort of stuck, trying to get the requirements finalized, it was an amazing, dramatic difference.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I used to kid, going back 10 years, the agencies would come out with these modernization programs and they would take like 12 years to do. And I would say, what do you do after you modernize for 12 years? I guess you modernize again. It's like a continuous modernization cycle. Mike Hermus, if I asked you to point at a program that you think DevOps processes being used going to make a big difference, what comes to mind?
So I'm going to cheat and quickly give you two things of very different flavors. The first is, as I mentioned, at the HQ level, we're not managing large enterprise programs typically, but we do have some. And one of the ones that we do have is a content management platform as a services, which manages all of our public-facing websites. And that is something that 4 years ago we kind of transitioned to an open source platform. And over that time, we have actually transitioned to a full DevOps pipeline implementation. And as we've matured in that process, that team has reduced the overall life cycle for getting content changes to production by about 80%, and actually reduced the deployment time itself by about 95%. So very, very successful kind of microcosm of how DevOps can really add value to, I think, the enterprise. But for us at the HQ level, the bigger picture for me is what I alluded to earlier, which is how do we scale this across the enterprise? And you heard Stu, I think, mention governance, and that came up a couple times. And so we really have a large initiative across the department right now to actually transform how we govern the deployment of IT capabilities and how we oversee those programs. And what we're trying to do is inject the modern best practices that Mark referenced earlier, and make sure that the government and governance and the oversight processes support, enable, and encourage those best practices. And that includes DevOps, that includes containerization, that includes overall agile methodologies. And so, as you can imagine, that's a fairly large and ambitious effort that is currently ongoing, but we're seeing signs of success already today, and that's very, very important to the department.
Excellent. The other thing I like what you said there is you actually have some performance measures to show some of the exponential gains you're getting in actually getting things done. That's, I think, important too. Stu Hammer, if I asked you to point at a program you think that you see progress being made, what comes to mind?
Well, we at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, I thought about this, and we have a number of Agile and DevOps and the merge, both. But one of that jumps to mind is a Department of Defense project that we've been doing with the Army, and the complexity around this was around that this was an ammunitions planning and forecasting system deployed worldwide, used by the Army, all commands and the Marine Corps. And the rules, if you think about a planning and forecasting system, it changes all the time. It was taking us over a month to release. It was taking us over 3 weeks to test. So when we picked up this program, we knew that we had to do something different, and we kind of we went all in. We the team wasn't quite agile, so we began the agile really beefing up the Agile side, and then we put in the automation around the DevOps side, and including moving them to the cloud so we could provision environments very quickly. And the results were significant. We cut testing down from 3 weeks down to 3 hours. Yeah. We cut releases down from over that month to daily, and in fact I was just talking to a chief architect, and he said, Stu, I can do it in 45 minutes. All right. And it's really about being able to meet the stakeholders' needs and be able to drive that, and we may not deploy to production on that frequency, but at least getting that out to our clients and out to our stakeholders gives them the ability to value and evaluate that capability.
Absolutely. Decision making in a world where decision time's approaching zero. Chuck, I want to hear from you too, but we got to take a short break. First, you're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM. I'm Jim Fleisig here with Mark Schwartz from USCIS, Mike Hermus from headquarters at Homeland Security, Rob Thomas from the VA, Jeffrey Johnson from USPS. Chuck Svoboda from Red Hat Public Sector, and Stu Hammer from Hewlett Packard Enterprise U.S. Public Services. And we're talking DevOps. When we went to break, we were talking about specific programs. We hadn't heard yet from Chuck Svoboda at Red Hat. Chuck, if I asked you to identify what you see as a program that you would point to as one that's really making a difference.
Yeah, sure. So we were working with a federal scientific agency that was just mired in traditional ALM, application lifecycle management. And they asked us to help them get out of this rut. And so we went in there and we, during discovery, looked at their software development lifecycle. And what we ended up finding was about 12 steps that, with a lot of manual minutia, a lot of those tech details we were talking about, we don't want to necessarily focus on too much. And we actually applied our commercial distribution of Kubernetes, which is OpenShift container platform, to it. And what ended up happening is we reduced those 12 very manual steps to 7 very automated steps. Okay. And you can imagine each of those steps have a dollar cost, a labor cost associated with them, so a strict reduction in cost with a pretty good ROI behind it. And ancillary to that was that because we were able to automate so much, developers were actually able to move quite a bit faster and get a lot more out much more quickly, fail fast, test out new methodologies, experiment, just have fun. And as we talk about governance quite a bit today, one of the great things about OpenShift and these DevOps type platforms is that you can actually define, your operators, your administrators, your architects can define policy centrally, and then the platform actually governs it across the entire platform, so that when a developer deploys an application, it's guaranteed that that policy goes with it, which makes it much more safe, and then again, results in that reduction of time.
Excellent, excellent. Great stuff there. Let's talk about lessons learned. What we like to do on the show too is, we've got a lot of listeners out there, a lot of people, your colleagues, and if you can help them by mentioning a few things that you're learning along the way, may help them. Let's start with Mike Hermus. Mike, what are some of the lessons you're learning along the way here with these initiatives that can help your colleagues in industry and government as they work these programs?
Great, yeah, no, happy to do that. So I think some of it's kind of very trite but very true, right? I think we talked a lot about stakeholders and engagement. One of the funniest things I hear people say is, yeah, well, I'm just going to hire a DevOps team and I'm going to drop them in, and now we're doing DevOps, right?
Yeah, right.
It doesn't work that way, right? As the practitioners will tell you, DevOps is effectively, kind of like Mark said, a way of life, and it requires lots of changes throughout the organization. So engaging all the relevant stakeholders and explaining to them what's valuable, what's in it for them, how does it make their lives better, how does it improve the outcomes of the business or the mission, is absolutely critical. I mean, that's true of any change, but certainly very true here. I think the other thing that is really important in a federal context, but really in any context these days, is that security is one of the points that you can really show a lot of leverage and value in, and you have to engage that stakeholder particularly well.
Absolutely.
And so turning DevOps into SecDevOps is really, I think, where the future has to be here, because if we can't build security and other compliance-related activities into the automated DevOps process, we're going to be DOA.
Yeah. I love that a lot. I mean, the cybersecurity is such a big deal. We do more shows around cybersecurity than anything else, and having my PII part of 7 breaches now, one of which turned into a full identity theft. I'm on a mission on that particular issue. So I'm glad to hear that. Mark, what do you think? What are some of the lessons you're learning along the way here as you implement your DevOps processes?
I often like to start with what Mike says and take the opposite point of view. That's
always a good thing. You're a component.
So it's not really the opposite point of view. It's just, and I think he would agree with this also, it is very complicated. It does involve a lot of cultural change, but I think the important thing is just do it. A lot of organizations I hear saying, oh, well, we can't do that until first we do this and we do this and we have this cultural change and we remove this policy and whatever. And I think something like DevOps, it's meant to be incremental. You start doing it and then you use that to change the culture and everything else.
Right.
So my lesson is find a way, carve out a space, and just start doing DevOps right away.
If you want to get to the top of the ladder, you got to start with the first rung, right? And work your way up. I like that. Very good. Jeff Johnson, what do you think? What are some of the lessons you're learning along the way here that you'd pass on to your colleagues?
So I think that the business process integration and that business customer integration is absolutely critical. And if you have to carve out a space or a tight group to be able to do that, that's where the success lies. And sometimes you need to lead from the IT space, and you need to say, you know, we think we understand what you're getting at. Maybe we're not putting all the T's and C's on the requirement, but here's a proposal. And so you're sitting at the table as partners and discussing something that is working, something that is functional, something that you could release today to make the business more effective, to increase revenue, to increase your mission capacity. And so it constrains the conversation, not about the pontificating on what the ideal state might be, but how can we make something better today? And then we're going to come back tomorrow as a team, and we're going to do it again.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Rob Thomas, what do you think if I asked you, what are some of the lessons you're learning along the way here, some of the things that you'd be tell someone else who's getting involved in this, that be aware of these things?
Sure. So I would say, similar to my colleagues, first and foremost for me, the challenge, the greatest challenge was culture, because it is about new roles and shared responsibilities. No longer are you throwing documents or business requirements documents over the transom. It's about bringing the folks actually together. Everybody's got skin in the game. Everybody has to roll up their sleeves. I think one of the hardest things for us was creating the repeatable processes, because you have to have that in order to impose the ruthless automation that you have to do. We had 7 different release processes. Benefits had a release process, cemetery had a release process, health had a release process, and I collapsed those all into one release process. That was a major challenge. We had 12 different calendars for our change, and we made one big board, and now across health, benefits, and cemetery, we have one change management, one big board on our calendar. We actually call it Polaris because it's an important part of what's going into production. So those were the big challenges that I saw, because the roles change for everybody in a DevOps environment, and people are worried about their jobs. In the past, we had 10 different groups, hundreds of people doing things in a completely different way than their colleagues within the same organization. Now they're all doing it the same exact way.
Wow. You brought up culture, and so did Mark. It's interesting because this is show number 141. Culture has come up in 141 shows as an issue. Usually comes up during the challenges. So you guys brought it in a little earlier. You brought it in with the lessons learned. But let's go to Chuck Svoboda. Chuck, what do you think in terms of lessons learned here? What kind of wisdom would you pass on to our listening audience about?
Well, to kind of extend off what Mark was saying, be iterative, right? That's so important. Don't bite off more you can chew when you go down this DevOps journey, because it is a journey. It's not all, it's not one hit. So, find that MVP, that minimally viable product or project, and then, put in your Nikes and just do it, right? Don't sit around. Don't get into this analysis paralysis. Just kind of move forward. Eat the White Castle hamburger, not the porterhouse. The other thing is, there is a lot in the industry today, and I'm talking what pros like Red Hat and HP and other private companies are doing to build these DevOps tools. So don't roll your own, right? I mean, it used to be, maybe I can remember about 5 years ago when I was working at Booz Allen, the NSA had a problem, so they built this project called Cloudbase, which is a secure columnar database, big data database, which they open sourced to Cumulo. They had to do it because it didn't exist. It didn't exist, right? Now, the rate of innovation in the market is hockey stick to the point that most likely the tools are going to be out there that fit 99% of your needs. And guess what? If they don't, get involved in the community and help them build it for you, right? So it's that old build versus buy. Buy the tools and then build your business functionality on top of it. Let us take care of, again, pros like Red Hat and HP, let us take care of all the non-fun plumbing, right? When you redo your bathroom, don't build the pipes. Just, don't even, hire a plumber, and just drop the sink in, right?
Yeah.
So
I once finished a basement myself, and it's one of those things that you never do again. I still think I have that white stuff in my lungs from the sanding I was doing back 20 years ago.
What I like to say is I'm probably smart enough to build my own jalopy of a car, but I'd rather just go down to a Ford dealership, buy one, and drive it to point A to point B.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I like the idea with the tool sets. The thing in the government frustrates me a little bit is I see like really cool tools, but the budget might not be there. But so I think what I would tell companies is before you talk about the tool, talk about the stuff that the government can stop doing or tools they can get rid of if they buy your tool. Then you'll have a chance, that kind of thing. Stu, what do you think in terms of lessons learned here?
Well, I think a few things. Number one, know what you don't know. And a lot of that, what I mean is that a lot of
I didn't think about that. Know what you don't know. Go ahead.
Okay. So as people, as organizations, as agencies jump into DevOps, Agile, the tools, they pull them together, but they're really, there's gaps. There's significant gaps. So understanding those gaps and understanding those issues are critical. Mm-hmm. And building kind of that plan, that roadmap to get you there is essential. And it's short, medium, and long-term initiatives to kind of get you. It's fast, we can go fast, but you still need to have the plan to get there, and that plan will change along the way. We've been pretty successful at HP doing one-day workshops where we just get the stakeholders together. What's your pain points? What's your future state? And then walking them through a model of DevOps and filling in those gaps. So that's probably one of the most critical lessons learned. Talked about slowing things down. I think that's important to make sure that the training, the capability is in place. And I think everybody kind of hit on the tools and the new shiny object. Let's just throw that into the mix. You got to try to evolve to a standardization of your tools eventually, and because there's a lot, and there'll be in 8 months they'll change again.
Yes, they will.
And so the lessons learned is work towards that standardization, and security is such a big aspect. Shift it left, do as much of that code scanning and security analysis, and adopt the risk management framework capabilities and other processes as much as possible.
Yeah, excellent points. Very good. Well said. Thanks. Rob Thomas, let's talk about challenges. Some of the things out there yet, that the big challenges that you face daily, and the things that you still have to overcome to really get where you want to be. What are some of those challenges that you bump into on a daily basis?
I would say from my perspective at the VA, it's the architecture, it's the IT security, those types of things that are key and a part of the development and the delivery. We're still working through how we get the standards organization folks with us on the development teams, because the one thing that is continuing to be a challenge is you don't want to have security bolted on at the end. You don't want to have an architecture out of alignment at the end. So you got to bake those things in up front. And what we're doing right now is getting the architects and the security engineers on the actual Scrum and Agile teams, so they're actually a part of the process. In the past, we've always had governance boards, which means we line things up at the dock waiting for somebody to give approval, and instead now we're telling them they're an integrated part of the team. So I think those things are still being worked through. 508 and the FSMA testing, all of those things are part and parcel to the delivery, and we need to streamline this in a better way. So those are some of the challenges. And then the dev environment and the test environment being the same as the production environment, so we can get to a prescriptive nature, so we don't have multiple dev environments like we do today, and we have the dev and the test exactly the same as the production, or as close as we can, so we have success. Those are some of the challenges I'm working through right now.
Yeah, it's interesting, just the evolution of a lot of these things, because I mean, there was a day, you go back back years, and you kept development separate from production and production separate from ops, and you know, it was like, you know, they were all, and then they fought with each other, and everybody argued with each other and blamed each other and all that stuff. And see, now with DevOps seems to be like, you know, the culture issue. You know, let's get together and we can work these things a little differently here. We don't have to be working against each other. We can work with each other. Jeffrey Johnson, what do you think are some of the big challenges that you see that you're facing on a daily basis that you need to overcome to get to where you want to go?
So I think a lot of the comments have kind of touched around the challenges that we're talking about. So you've heard a lot mentioned about compliance and security, and I would throw finance planning into the mix of those decisions that need to be made corporately in order to make sure that we're working on the most important things. And how do we bring those tool sets, how do we bring that automation to the front as part of the team and as part of the decision making? And I would argue that when we talk about Agile and we talk about this constant change and accepting change and DevOps and the speed of innovation that we're going to incentivize, it causes a lot of people to recoil with, I don't know how to control that rate of speed. I don't have the resources to do that. But when we really break it apart and when we say, you know what we're going to do, we're going to fix the cost and we're going to fix the schedule because we're going to time box things, and we're going to fix some of these compliance elements through automation and testing, and we're going to fix some of these security issues up front in the process. We're gonna mistake proof the process so we don't have these things at the end. All of a sudden you're buying down that risk up front. You're actually reducing the amount of change for some of those other organizational concerns, some of those other corporate risks that we need to pay attention to. So I think the way we talk about it in order to really buy down that change early and transparently in a measured way by measuring what we treasure from a corporate view, right, will get us a long way towards that conversation and allowing the entire business ecosystem to come to the table on this.
Yeah, that's an excellent point there, because I think what people miss is just the high cost of rework. I mean, you know, if you get it right up front, and you don't have to rework it over and over and over and over again, you know, it just runs up cost and frustration, and you know, management gets frustrated and everything else. So the point you're making about getting it, you know, focus and getting it right early is so important. Mark Schwartz, so USCIS, what do you think? Some of the challenges, the big challenges you face every day that you still feel like you need to overcome them in order to be where you really want to be with this?
Actually, I'd like to follow on one of the things you just said.
Okay.
In fact, rework is often a cost, but I think part of what we buy into with the DevOps approach is that when we release something, it's not finished. You know, we're going to keep changing it, we're going to keep incrementally improving it.
Right.
Even on the technical side, usually after you develop something, you then have to go back and refactor it and improve it it technically. And that's an accepted part of Agile techniques.
Sure.
So you don't want meaningless rework, of course,
right,
but you do want to move quickly enough so that you're still going to have to come back and do some other things. So I just wanted to make sure we had that clarification there.
That's a good point. See, what you're saying, though, to me is more enhancements rework. I mean, you know, making it better and better and better. What I think we don't want to do is have things that are breaking all the time, and you have to go back and, you know, fix things that are not working right.
Right. But I'm not necessarily talking about enhancements. In fact, extreme programming, good example. The principle is you start by writing a test. You write your test before you write your code, right? And then you write your code and you keep running the test until it passes, and then you know you're done. But you're not done yet, because the third step is always that you go back and you say, how can I improve my code? How can I make the code better? Not enhancing it, but just improving it, you know, internally. So in terms of the challenges, I think DevOps is a species of lean software development. Mm-hmm. It's all about reducing cycle times, like Lean Six Sigma, lean manufacturing. Sure. And DevOps, the automation practices reduce the cycle time from when a developer finishes what they're doing until something gets to production. And that's this very small part of the value chain. You still have a lot of other stuff that happens before and after that. And so the challenge is how do we reduce the cycle time on all the stuff that comes before and after? For example, the procurement process, right? If we still have a long procurement cycle before we start doing our DevOps, we haven't really reduced our cycle time meaningfully.
Right. Total cost difference.
That's right. So we have to take that overarching systems view of everything we're doing.
I love it. I knew I was going to get smarter today. I mean, hearing a lot of good stuff from these guys. I want to hear from our other panelists on this too, but we need to take another short break. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Radio 1500 AM. I'm Jim Fleisig here with Mark Schwartz from USCIS, Mike Hermus from Homeland Security Headquarters, Rob Thomas from VA, Jeffrey Johnson from the Postal Service, Chuck Svoboda from Red Hat Public Sector, and Stu Hammer from Hewlett Packard Enterprise, U.S. Public Services. And we're talking DevOps. When we went to break, we had heard from some of our panelists about some of the challenges. Let's hear from some our other panelists on that same question. Mike Hermus, what are some of the big challenges you see that still need to be overcome to really get to where you want to be as a mature organization with DevOps?
Absolutely. So, Mark in the earlier segment kind of led in. I didn't pay him for this, but the ubiquitous challenges with any major change in the federal government are people, processes, and culture.
Sure.
And so we talked about how we're trying at the Department of Homeland Security to really focus on some of those transformations that have to be put in place to support and enable the technical practices of DevOps. And Mark alluded to the fact that if you look at the things before and after, the quote-unquote DevOps, those are things that really need to focus to extract maximum value. So that is one of the major challenges, and that it's not a technical problem, right? And it has a lot of stakeholders and a lot of moving parts, so it's quite hard. But I think the other thing you see is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach necessarily for these programs that we have across the department. And how do we actually pull together, standardize as much as possible to provide guidance and best practice principles, but also enable these programs to find what works for them and to really deliver on their terms. And of course, DevOps, as we all know, people like to think of it as one big, process, but it's a lot of little processes in many cases tied together. And there's different tools and emerging tools, and as Stu alluded to earlier, those are changing constantly. So how do we, again, get people to where they need to be, given that this whole ecosystem is emerging and also changing? That is a major challenge for us. And at the department level, we're trying to help folks kind of wrestle with that problem.
So you're helping to steer, let them row.
Correct.
Interesting. Let's talk about challenges with our private sector panelists. Chuck Svoboda, what do you think in terms of some of the challenges that are remaining to be overcome to really get this thing to where it's basically just standard procedure?
Yeah, sure. So I think at the most basic level is trust. And one word is trust. The folks who are actually implementing these in organizations have to trust that all these new tools and processes are actually doing it right and doing it better than you ever could if you were manually hands-on keyboard deploying your app or deploying middleware, et cetera, et cetera. And that this change is going to make their lives better, their jobs easier, get your weekends back, et cetera, et cetera. And once you get that trust established, that's where you can start to iteratively bring in the adoption of it, right? No one's going to adopt a new tool, a process, methodology, what have you, if they don't trust that it's actually working. If a developer doesn't trust that what I wrote on my laptop, if I just say, hey, go run this code for me, it just happens to work. Or an operator doesn't trust that I've set this policy and the platform is actually to govern and lock down everything and secure it how it's supposed to be, how I defined it, without me having to look over its shoulder.
I like that a lot. I used to have a saying that if you want to have trustworthy employees, you first have to trust them. Stu, what do you think are some of the challenges you see at Hewlett Packard?
Well, I think we do at Hewlett Packard Enterprise, we do a lot of operations, we do a lot of infrastructure. So one of the challenges I'm seeing in our contracts is that we have there's contractors that are doing development and contractors doing operations. And as an agency and as an advisor to the agency, you need to bring these together, and you need to bring the operations in as quickly as possible. Usually Dev and QA, if they're adopting Agile, they're working together. It's bringing the ops in, and that's been a consistent challenge because they may attend the Scrum meetings, but are they fully engaged? Are they fully there? And are they they still have their 15 forms they have to fill out, and it takes 3 weeks to provision a server. That's not right. Yeah, right. And so those kinds of challenges, I think many times we brought up a culture, and actually it's over 50% of Gardner actually said this, where 50% is process issues, and 40% of the issues with DevOps adoption is people issues. That's 90%. So we got to solve that. We got to solve that challenge with the culture. And the last thing I'll mention on challenges is, I think this was mentioned, Mark mentioned this early on in the show, the government is focused a lot on modernization. There's a lot of activities. So how do we integrate the modernization, this old legacy code, in with the DevOps processes? Sure. And that not only the culture and the people, but the technologies.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. And again, the culture issue is big. You can change somebody's job overnight. You can say this is your job tomorrow, but to change the behavior and how they actually perform the job is a whole different set of issues. Well, we like to always work towards the end of the show to talk about what's this all going to mean down the road. All the stuff we're doing here, what will it mean down the road to the government programs, government services, quality of life issues, and so forth. So let's talk about the future here. Everyone put on your look into your crystal ball as to where this stuff's going. Let's work our way right down the table. Let's start with Stu. Stu Hammer at HP Services. What do you see as the future? What's this all mean to us?
Well, it's still about the application. It's still about the software delivering quickly and with velocity. So I'll start simple. Adoption. We got to get Agile plus adopted across and appropriately, and then integrate, as I mentioned, integrate the teams, knock down those walls between QA, Dev, and operations. The other thing, I think we're seeing a lot more of enterprise DevOps, and and this is going to be, I think we're seeing this significantly because the tools are maturing. They're becoming much more from the nice open source tool that you can install, any developer can install and play with, to much more of an enterprise level, and that's really where we're getting to, and now we're seeing this extend to a federated DevOps enterprise. So if you think about our agencies that have either many commands or many organizations, you have to adopt that. The last thing I'll mention is microservices and componentization. And I'd like to say that it's like Back to the Future, because what that is, it's adopting the services, the architectures that we started to adopt with web services, SOA, but in a much more concise, much more scalable way. And I think that will become really big going forward.
Excellent points. Jeffrey Johnson, what's it look like for you down the road?
So when I think about the future and how DevOps plays into it, I think about how technology is changing not only the way we run our business internally and how we squeeze efficiencies out of the internal operations, but how technology is fundamentally changing the business that we're in. It's changing the customer expectations. It's changing how people communicate. It's changing how people expect to interact with their government agencies. And so technologists and technologies delivered by the government are going to continue to be more and more important to the delivery of government services, and particularly postal services. So DevOps allows us to incrementally and constantly increase and improve that customer experience and make it more meaningful and more valuable to the customer, also making technology a more critical business partner at the table in the strategy of our companies and agencies.
Yeah, I love it, the continuous improvement process and the fact that you're constantly talking about focus on the customer. Chuck Svoboda, where's this all going down the road, Chuck?
Yeah, so I'll get the pace of innovation in the market right now is moving so quickly. We're almost to the point where the DevOps way is completely and the tools that enable the same are almost commoditized. And with that, all the IT organizations will be able to kind of consume and do the DevOps methodologies by default. And that will bring much more proactive features and functions to the agency's needs, to the agency's end users much more quickly, as well as if something gets wrong or we have to make a change, to react to that much more quickly. And I think it's not only in this industry that we're talking about right here, IT, you can see it elsewhere. Just the commoditization, my gosh, SpaceX is putting up satellites. Who would have ever figured a commercial company building something that the government can use to put something into space like that, right? And it's been privatized, right? So the democratization of these tools that the government can use, these agencies can use to deliver DevOps, will just be more and more ubiquitous, and that's me talking again the hockey sticking of it all, so that everyone can take part in it and really move the needle.
Yeah, excellent. Rob Thomas, where's this all going down the road, Rob?
Well, I would say at the VA we're not going to be Netflix or Facebook anytime soon, but we are going to continue to work towards the future where we are more iterative going into development test and more often into production. For us at the VA, it's in the DevOps environment, it's first about improving the veterans' experience, it's about improving the employee experience, and then finally it's about the shared responsibility and collaboration. So inside CIO, showing up differently from an IT perspective, and then outside of CIO with our business partners in the health administration, the benefits administration, the cemetery administration, and the corporate, that we're working value creation and delivery to improve those experiences both for the veteran and the employees. That's where I want to see the future go.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to think about it. Improving the experience for the veteran in the future is what it's all about. Mike Hermus, what do you think, Mike? Where's this all going down the road? What's your crystal ball look like down there in the future?
I wish I had a real crystal ball. So, look, we heard it talking about applications, but we also heard it is about mission outcomes or business outcomes at the end of the day. And I think DevOps is fundamentally about kind of building and improving the capacity to deliver capability, to adapt to change, and to innovate by adding value to your mission or your organization. And I think that's the future I see, where we really are adopting and living into that vision of this capacity for flexibility and innovation at pace, at scale. Ultimately, I think we referenced a couple times security and other compliance-related activities. I think the future is, those compliance activities are automated as much as possible. You have SecDevOps, you have 508 built into it, you have all the other compliance-related activities automated as much as possible so you can focus on high-value activities. And then finally, I think hopefully the future, just like we've seen with other lean and agile principles, try to extend past the technology organization to the entire enterprise writ large, that these principles of automation are extended throughout the entire enterprise and organization.
Yeah, that's interesting points. The understanding working at a component when I worked at Secret Service, and I went up to Treasury, and now Secret Service was one of my bureaus back then, before when they were part of Treasury. It's a different perspective, and then looking at doing things across the enterprise a lot different than doing things at a component level, although components have enterprises too within themselves. Mark Schwartz. Mark, you're known around town as you've built a reputation in this particular field of DevOps, and I think people look to you as somebody who's a leader in this area. So where's it all going down the road, Mark? Where's it?
Thank you for all the nice words there. The future is bright. I think with the DevOps way of thinking and with the techniques that it brings in, it opens up all sorts of possibilities for government IT, being a very different way of thinking about how we deliver capabilities, mission capabilities. The waterfall approach has been so deeply built into everything we do in the government, in the IT world. And the possibility that DevOps holds out, I think, is instead of doing these massive waterfall projects that cost a lot of money and have a lot of risk and don't deliver for a long time, we can make things smaller. I mean, it's kind of simple, but the impact could be very big here. With DevOps, we can start to deliver capabilities in a matter of days, weeks, months, and we can keep delivering until we decide we've delivered enough. And we can make those decisions as we go. We can have governance at a much more granular level working in units of smaller investments instead of risking billions of dollars at a time, right? This is the big impact potentially for us.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well said. All right, as I always do, I try to take some notes and try to take a shot at summarizing some of the key points I heard here today. We talked about progress. What hit me right away is we're doing it. I mean, you know, when we first got into this, DevOps is happening. It's being done. It's being done in lots of areas. Progress is being made in education. Progress is being made in better understanding of what this is all about. I told you coming into today's show, you guys are educating me because I do think there was a lot of confusion in DevOps and Agile and containerization and is it a process? How's it with a methodology or whatever? And I think I also heard that we've got great evolution going on. It's just getting better and better and better. We've stepped on that first rung some time ago, and we're partway up the ladder now in terms of getting it all done. And I heard a lot about results orientation, and we hit the governance pretty hard, the fact that governance is important. When we talked about programs, we hit the VA benefit system, we hit the postoffice.com website, USCIS E-Verify, the headquarters content management. And we heard about performance improvements. I heard some statistics and things like that about just how much performance improvement we're seeing. And to me, when you are able to demonstrate quantitative results and performance, it makes it a no-brainer that we want to do this. Lessons learned, I heard that engaging all the stakeholders, getting everybody involved that's going to be impacted is extremely important. We talked about culture change, and again, I heard the just do it thing. You know, you can't just work through everybody's concerns about, you know, well, how's this impact me, that whatever, just start doing it and get people on board. And we talked a lot about on lessons about tools. There's a lot of tools coming today. There are new tools, and you know what we do know is DevOps is a hot topic. What we do know is people in Silicon Valley and companies that are making tools are going to know it too. So they're going to constantly be coming out with bigger and better products. And I think a challenge in the government's been, you know, how to get these bigger and better product tools, or you know, these new innovation and creative ideas in. And in order to do that, you might have to take some things out to manage within that budget process. When we talked about challenges, we talked about architecture, and you know, when you're doing DevOps, you're still within a large architecture. And we talked about the importance of security up front. We talked about the challenges, especially the day and age with cybersecurity being such a hot topic, and reading about breaches day after day after day, that security's got to be something that is a challenge that has to be met right up front. We talked about compliance, and I believe Jeffrey brought up finance. Some of the challenges around finances and, you know, managing within budgets and how you're going to do all this stuff. I also heard under the challenges the word trust. You know, you need to build trust in the organization. And if you can get people on board and they trust you, it makes things a lot easier. Future, quicker development, I heard. I heard DevOps becoming standard operating procedures and being used by default. And the only thing I'll add to the future conversation is we better get this stuff in place before the kids enter the workforce, because they're going to expect things to be done overnight. They're not going to expect things to take a year. They're going to expect things to take, there's an app for that tomorrow. So anyway, with that, I want to thank our panelists for taking time from your very, very busy schedules. I know you all have very important jobs, so thank you so much for coming out to do this with us. Thanks to our sponsors, without which we don't have a program, so thank you very much for being with us. Thanks to the good people here at federalnewsradio.com who always make things so pleasurable to do the show. And most importantly, thanks to our listening audience that tune in and listen to the program. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on federalnewsradio.com.